Welcome to another episode of the Vital MX post-race show. Round 9, Indianapolis, was a triple crown, and therefore we have triple the narratives and triple the drama to talk about. Honestly, Arlington 2 rounds ago was fairly controversial. I feel like Indianapolis eclipsed that. A lot happened, not a lot of it related to the results, but we'll get into both the finishing order and the on-track drama post-race comments in this episode of the Vital MX post-race show. And joining me to do all of that is, of course, Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. How's it going?
Hello. All good.
I feel like I got you quicker that time. I don't know how, but there's a lot to get to. So if we waste too much time, then we'll be here for hours. So Indy was the second Triple Crown of the season, of course. Indy traditionally now has some sort of hook to it. Showdown last year, Triple Crown the year before. Starting with that, because it's kind of relevant to what's coming up, I did some digging, asked around, and okay, first of all, to clarify, Indy technically counts as Midwest, right? I've got my geography correct? No? What's the term?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would consider it a bit
so that portion of the country is so diluted now with Ironman and Redbud and Detroit and Cleveland now and St. Louis that they said Indy is a conscious decision to kind of give it something that separates it from the rest of the calendar, let's say. So that's why we always seem to end up with either a Triple Crown or a Showdown in Indy. And a Triple Crown in Indy on this occasion proved to be quite controversial. Hunter Lawrence, of course, won the overall from Eli Tomac. But before we get into that, it was Eli Tomac's post-race comments which left a little bit of a mark on the industry and certainly fueled discussion even in the pits immediately following the post-race press briefing. I have them here in case you haven't listened, and so we can get it word for word. He said, I almost got taken out in a second moto by a lapper, so yeah, it's bad. It's bad. I think if the track's sub 50 seconds, make it a 15-man gate. I mean, they're just riders that are way off the pace of the top lead group. And if the promoter wants to potentially lose championship contenders, I mean, then let's keep it the way it is. But yeah, frustrating, but got out of here healthy and clean, and seconds what we had. So, immediate reaction, immediate takeaways?
He's not wrong. I think, there's the aggressiveness of clipping guys. He ended up continuing to speak on it after another follow-up question. I mean, yeah, to put it bluntly, we got into it more, and Coop also discussed in the presser when I was in there. And if you compare any other motorsports, the fact that if a lapper interferes is in some way, shape, or form penalized, which of course gives them more motivation to move. I think we've had this endless tug and back and forth of, well, they're also in their own battle and they're trying their best. Do they stay in the race line? Do they not? And it's just kind of, every time the discussion comes up, it feels like it kind of goes in circles and you just kick the can down the road and nobody really ever addresses it. But one of the most simple ways to address it is, I think Webb said, he goes, if you penalize them with money, they're going to move if it's going to cost them money. They're not wrong. Like, it is, I get it. They're out there racing. But again, take any other motorsports. I'm sorry. There is, as some people say, the saying goes, there is a race going on and you're not in it. Yes, you're in your own race, but the race that everybody cares about is going on and you're getting in the middle of it. That goes for Freeze and Moran's quite heavily this weekend, especially everybody's favorite conversational point. Somehow it's always Vince. I know that Eli was aggressive in saying cut people, but then Eli also followed up and admitted it. It's the same repeat offenders, meaning, yeah, sometimes it's a couple different guys, but we're usually talking about roughly the same 3 people per class. And that's where it comes back to, why are we not just doing something about it? We have a new penalty point system. I guess we'll see when that comes out. If they do give those guys any license points, that's the most simple one, is give them some sort of consequence.
Well, I can confirm that now. Race Direction did look at Cole Thompson with Hunter Lawrence and Vince Freeze with Eli Tomac. They reviewed it in the context of, actually, the list of contextual points was quite interesting to me, so I'll quote it exactly here. Race Direction reviewed potential blue flag infractions after extensive review of fast lane, riding erratically and impeding progress. No penalty was assessed. So we've of course always heard about blue flag discussions and whatnot, but to have the criteria listed in that way, it's quite interesting to get a bit more insight into what they're looking for. Of course, I think everyone's going to have different opinions on whether
What are we
they...
looking for? Vince Freeze jumping sideways across a rhythm lane and almost killing Eli doesn't count as impeding in any shape or form?
But I guess the defense there, and I'm not saying I believe this or I'm not defending, but the defense would be, yeah, it's gnarly out there and I got sketchy. Like, sorry. Like, you know, and I guess if someone says that, what do you say? No, you're lying. That was honest or that was on purpose.
Yeah, well, it comes back to, there's whole saying, you can do things with the best of intentions, doesn't mean you're in the right. I don't care if you didn't mean to do it. You still did it. And I'm sorry, that's a consequence of you being in this situation. You chose to continue to try to race while there's blue flags notify you that the leaders are coming. Again, I get it. You're battling for a spot. You're making a conscious decision by still trying to race through the situation and put the leaders at risk and put the situation at risk. So I'm sorry you didn't mean to do it. It's like the same. This goes back to the argument with the red cross flag thing of them saying, oh, well, it depends if they meant to do it, if they did it with intention. Nobody means to jump the red cross flag on intention. Nobody means to almost clean out a leader with intention when they're getting lapped. It doesn't matter if they did it with an intention. They still did it. That's all that matters is the action, not the thought behind it.
Where my mind immediately went off the back of Eli's comments was to Indianapolis 2024, because again, we had a Triple Crown on that occasion. And although I recall there being a lot of talk of the track being gnarly, and this was a gnarly race, I don't remember it being that targeted, people being that up in arms about the situation. I just looked. Indy 2024 lap times were 49 seconds, more 44, 45 on this occasion. So maybe those 5 seconds a lap really changes things? I don't know. It's more laps, obviously. You're coming up on guys a little quicker. Maybe those 5 seconds a lap are kind of what broke the back of the situation.
Because, again, if you're looking at the lap time within 8 or 9 laps, that's a whole nother additional lap down, I guess you would call, or like that's an additional lap, 5 seconds lap time difference if you're around 45 seconds. 9 laps.
I'll take your word for it. That was a lot of math to follow. But no, I am surprised that it isn't more of a constant theme, because again, a Triple Crown in Indy is nothing new. But what was a little bit new is a lot of riders said to me after the race that the track was in its best condition in the final main event. You've never heard that in Indy. And it wasn't as soft as normal, and it actually continued to harden up as the night went on. But what that's leading me to think is maybe that caused some of these infractions, if you want to call it that, because it wasn't so soft, and therefore you were more committed to your lines and whatnot, and you couldn't just sort of like move around as easy. I don't know. I thought maybe this could have something to do with it, like it's a bit more grabby.
Well, to your point, if it's harder, like even when they're in the thick of a battle, I did feel like I saw more guys stick. The only rhythm lane that really were tripping everybody up was a little bit before the finish if they couldn't get the off, which really wasn't a problem for the 450s. That was more of a 250 issue. But then the rhythm lane after the right-hand sweeper, which depended on if you were trying to go roll triple or 2-2-3, or if you were going 2-3, whatever. That's the only rhythm lane. So if it is harder and it's not soft, even as a privateer or a backmarker or whatever you want to call it is getting past, they probably aren't. They're still able to commit to stuff. So, and then also,
maybe it's just a bit racier, like maybe you do have a bit more confidence and therefore you're racing into turns more. Like there is less trepidation. You believe in yourself a little bit more, which means that you're less aware of what's going on around you.
I also feel like because that track was a bit one line, like the premium spot you were going to be in every rhythm was in the same spot. When it's also not as soft, I feel like Indy typically in the past, when it's really, really soft, you get that weird thing where guys start picking weird rhythms to not be landing in and out of ruts. So you would have privateers off into, I keep saying privateers. I'm going to have my own rant about that. Backmarkers. If you have backmarkers that are starting to struggle with the big rhythms, they will switch up and maybe be on the opposite of the race line because it hasn't been used as much. So they kind of are more naturally out of the way as backmarkers, where I felt like everybody was sticking more to the race line this weekend, which could be part of that. Again, if it's not breaking down as much, it's more, hey, I'm going to stay here. I'm not, even when I'm not in the thick of being lapped, I'm comfortable being in this line.
Yeah, like, or even on the opposite end of the spectrum, you're being lapped going into the corner before the whoops. I feel like your automatic move would be, I'm going to slow down and hog the inside here. But then someone like Jacob is using that as his race line, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't expect this. Now I'm in the way, and here we are, I'm going to get blasted. So I don't sympathize with Cole Thompson or Vince Freeze because those were both blatantly idiotic and a lack of awareness. But I do sympathize on the whole that generally, for every rider, it can be difficult to, read what's going on behind you and figure out where to go. But then ultimately, the solution to that is really slow down and just get out of the way rather than try to race and get out of the way. But I don't know. I think Tomac said this, or Webb, or maybe even Hunter. One of them said that you don't see this in any other motorsports. But again, we're such a unique unicorn of a motorsport where we don't have the same technology or the same consistency with surfaces and track conditions and whatnot. So we can't have a universal, this is how it's done, because it changes not only week by week, lap by lap. Yeah. So I don't know what the fix is.
Well, like I said, I still think of fishing. Yes, you go to the world's largest motorsport, or the what's considered the premier motorsports in certain categories. You can't compare it to F1 or MotoGP because the field sizes, for the size of the course, I would technically say is smaller. It's much more premier. The equipment's much more matched, talent, skills, etc. So you don't end up with that situation a lot. Maybe want to compare, yes, NASCAR actually gets a lot of back markers and they do stay out of the way because there is a lot of officiating against it. Take like Le Mans style racing, like GT class racing, where you have different speed of cars on the track. There's a lot of officiating doing on how they block the leaders from other classes. Again, it comes back to what we were talking the week before and talking before that. Our sport is a little loose still. It lacks officiating. It lacks really giving anybody a consequence for ever doing anything at all. And I've said this, whether we're talking about somebody being in the way during a race or being in a way during qualifying, there's not other places you could get away with this. But in moto, it's just, like you said, it kind of comes back to somebody go, well, did you do it on purpose? No. That's fine then. That's kind of seems to be the attitude here, or like we have here, like the conversation happens even with some of the powers that be, the top riders, the teams speak out about it, and it just circles around and never really goes anywhere. We don't try anything. And I've seen, I think it was AC and JB have kind of hinted at, I know Ricky's hinted at, and some of the teams have talked about the potential of communication comms coming in next year. And I've read some comments online where a few people are like, yeah, that'll change it. I don't know if that really changes anything. Yeah, it's a more direct line of communication. Maybe a race official can warn them they're actually going to get in trouble, but not saying the blue flag system's perfect. It's not, but the riders, again, back to actually a good point. They say they're not doing it on purpose. There kind of is. When they're signaled that some leaders are coming, they're making a conscious effort to not get out of the way. And I don't know if that changes that much with comm systems. Like maybe a little bit, but does it really fix the problem when there's no consequence for not listening?
The Cole Thompson example, whether you're a backmarker or not, whether that's Hunter or someone you're racing with, to move over like that to cover the inside from the outside of the track, no matter who's behind you, is asinine on a Supercross track in a Supercross race. Like, that's just general, that's not how you do things if you want to survive. So, like, there's no defense for that at all. No matter if you want to shout about needing comms or needing better flagging or needing better officiating, that was just straight up a weird, bizarre, dumb move. And the same for Vince. Again, maybe you could play the defense with Vince for, I got cross-rutted and got off balance and it's gnarly out there. But, similar to what Kenny said about Hunter in Seattle with that move, you kind of judge guys off of their history and whether they're known for these things. And unfortunately, Vince has zero credit with riders, industry, pits, officials, promoters, whoever you want to list.
Yeah, there's not a single person that will defend his actions. Heck, I know somebody who's a friend of his that would defend his actions until recently. Vince did something similar to him, he told me. So, yeah, it's indefensible. One other thing that kind of stood out to me a little bit with Indy of like you said, comparing Indy's a past, one other thing that's an issue. And I know this always happens in Supercross, but when you really look at the entry list this weekend's prevalent, yes, we are down large amount of your top riders. So there is more and more back markers, lower level guys getting in. That's part of the sport, but also just more of them, they're going to go down. And it's kind of weird to look at. I know this stat's been brought up a few times. Take a random year, take 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Time qualifying at most races, the gap between first and say 20th or 22nd, which should be in a main, is smaller than it's been quite often throughout the sport's history. However, come race time, it isn't like the gaps are, of course, massive come race time. So, as a whole, on one hand, you could say the sport, the riders that are participating are potentially as an overall field spread pretty quick at the moment, but their ability to do it across the race distance, whether that's training, whether that's how bad the tracks are breaking down compared to qualifying. That's always a conversation point in the four-stroke era, the Triple Crown, more like top-level racing going on. These guys tend to fall off a lot more than they should probably come race time. And this always comes back to a hard thing I have with, people saying this person deserves support or this guy that's in 30th deserves support or whatever. Like, they're still a ways off really being a factor in this sport.
I somewhat agree with Eli, or not agree, but I would back the decision to go to 15-man gates for the main event purely because it would add a bit more excitement to the cutoff in a heat race, and it would add a bit more value to making a main event, I feel. Perhaps the same value that you have at Anaheim 1 would carry over to the middle of the season, even when there are injuries. So, whilst I don't think that's going to happen, and it's not like I would lobby for it, I don't hate that idea from Eli. And I've said the same with MXGP. Like, I don't think you need 40-man gates outdoors. 30 is fine. And that's another thing that Eli went out of his way to mention. Like, you don't necessarily need to pack as many people into a race as you possibly can.
And I do understand that. I will say I'm kind of indifferent. I do understand the stat behind it, the point behind it. Of course, I still do love the legacy of our sport of the privateer, the small guy. It's one of the very few sports, especially motorsports in the world, that you can, as an individual, you can tackle. And that's one other point. I know some of this now has turned into, I've seen online today, a whole anti-privateer thing by certain people. It's nothing about that. As I said, I spun my words earlier. It's backmarkers. It's just people that are simply being lapped, whether they're factory, whether they're support, whether they're privateer, whether, I don't care what they are. It's just,
this is, if you want to underline just how confusing it can be, Houston 2021, it was Dean Wilson who cost Ken Roxon a win. And that's not a privateer. So then, like, what, how are you now? Dean Wilson's a problem, and that's a star of the sport. So, like, it is difficult even to categorize the group you want to target with your claims, or your actions.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm ultimately getting to is, it's nothing against a privateer or this or that. It comes down to a quality factor, and I do understand what Eli or Coop in this situation, especially what Eli was pushing and saying, is he's not wrong when there's that big. Like, he was very harsh on the lap time difference. When there is that big of a difference, just because we can run that many people, should we, when the quality is not there? And again, I'm saying that, yes, any of us listening to this podcast, anybody can sit here and go, well, that dude in 20th whoops all of our existence. Yes, they do. I get it. It still doesn't mean just because they're decently good means they deserve that's like so you kind of have to weigh up eventually. Do we want to be, hey, cool, we have this many spots, doesn't really matter how far off you are? And again, maybe not even how far off you're. Just, I get back to the whole, just nobody listens. No real officiating, no consequences. As long as there's no consequences for anything, the problem still lies. Like, cutting down to 15 sort of helps, but you would still have, in a situation like this, what did they lap up to on the chart in the 450s?
Well, of course, it was probably different across the different main events, but I have main event 1 here. Main event 1 was 13th. Event, the final race was 12, so not too much difference.
Longer main, so outside Triple Crown, still, it still happens a little bit, but just the key problem, I think, in general in our sport, like I said, whether we're talking about time qualifying, whether we're talking about a main, etc., is no consequence, no officiating. It doesn't change. Doesn't matter if you really add comms, doesn't matter what you do, as long as the riders can get away with things.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not a new problem. This isn't revolutionary discussion. What Eli said isn't anything out of the blue that no one's not heard before. So, is anything going to change? No, probably not. And stay tuned to either another round this year or a round next year where exactly the same narrative is played out, because this sport does enjoy going in circles without much action or attention. So I would say watch for space, but if you watch for space, you'll just end up in the same position.
You're just going to watch cement dry.
Are we done with that segment?
Yes, let's talk about racing.
So I said this to Lars after the race. It's really weird to say, like, Hunter proved himself again, because we're so far down the road of Hunter as a championship contender. But to a degree, every time that Hunter does this, I'm still like, well, look at Hunter. He can do this. I'm still in that stage of every performance hits me a little harder than it would if it's the norm. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know. But Indy was another great one. And for him to even win with a fourth in the second main event, I think that's a testament to just how good he was.
I agree with that. It is interesting because I asked him post-race he's got 2 career 450 overalls now. So, hey, which one, we're either more hard-fought. He went with the standard answer. If every win is hard-fought, of course. But I was more impressed with the Indy win than the first win. And maybe because it's, hey, like, not to say, we always knew Hunter was going to get a Supercross win, but some guys get them and never repeat. Sometimes the saying is getting the second one's always harder to back it up. There's plenty of guys that get one win in a season. Maybe it's not till another year till they do multiple, so that's impressive. The way he did it, the battles he was in, the pressure he was under between the guys he was battling. Overall impressed. I do just find it interesting also listening to Hunter, even coming off the heels of last weekend, like where he thinks he should be is, a rider like him gets beat at Daytona by Eli Tomac, now the 8-time winner. You think some people would probably, everybody always anybody in that situation wants to win. You think there'd be one part of me to be able to take a step back and go, we were saying last weekend, the fact that he got second, got that close to Eli is still something pretty gnarly, but he, I guess, left Daytona basically being like, pretty pissed that he didn't get it done. Very pissed, and that's what triggered the huge test this week, whereas he said after the race that he had rode 5 days in a row, did a ton of work with the team. So, I'm impressed with Hunter. Like I said, I'm still continuously impressed with Hunter, and reading social comments the last couple weeks, I know some people have gone after, whether it's us, anybody that's really talking about the scenarios, are like, oh, everybody's so high on Hunter. There's a good reason to be, and it's nothing against Tomac. Tomac is amazing. This is one of the best Elis we've ever seen. It's just also very cool from a narrative standpoint to see Hunter step up to go against Eli like this.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it, and I don't know why, because honestly, Eli and Hunter are toe to toe. Neck and neck would have been the appropriate use of and therefore they deserve equal credit and equal attention and whatever else, because this really is, there's nothing to split them at all. So why wouldn't you give Hunter the same credit as Eli? And in fact, people are a bit annoyed that maybe he gets more credit, but it's because Eli's been here before, and as you said, Hunter has risen to this level. Speaking of the test, so this has been an ongoing topic, saga, where Hunter has hinted at being, I wouldn't say unhappy with a bike, but let's just say aware that there is room for improvement. And he went there again on press day and refused to acknowledge even what area of the bike it was, simply narrowed it down to the bike, which wasn't very helpful. So after the race, I specifically went to Lars and said, look, Hunter said this, and I need a little bit more to go off of, because I don't know what to do with that. I don't have the transcript of it, so you can listen to it on the same podcast network that you're listening to this show. But Lars gave a pretty good explanation of basically just going from front to rear suspension, and you fix the front a bit, and then it creates an issue in the rear, and then you fix that, and you're back to the front, and the fact that you're never really going to land in the perfect space. But he did say Hunter in comparison to Jet, because this all made me harp back to OzX Open, where I don't remember the exact quote, but I'll dig it up this week. that Jet was talking about working with Showa and this feeling that he is looking for that he can't get. And I just distinctly remember talking to Hunter at the OzX and saying, yeah, Jet said this earlier in my interview. And Hunter was like, what? He said that in an interview? Oh, no, he can't say that. So I feel like that's all related. But in relation to Jet, Lars did say that Hunter wants the bike or needs a bike to be absolutely perfect because he's a little more of a thinker, whereas Jet maybe rolls with the punches a little more. And yeah, I don't know if this ever is figured out 100% of the way, but as proven by the 5 days of testing, they're going to keep on searching.
Well, to add to that, I know Dazzy, when I've talked to him before, has kind of made the comment comparing the brothers, and we're all fairly aware of this by watching their riding and everything, is they both are looking for somewhat the same thing, but Jet can overcome or compensate a little more due to body, positioning, his body build, a little bit of the way he rides the bike, a little bit different than Hunter, and the way he thinks. As he say, at times, Jet can compensate for something. The problem is still there. He'll still say it, but he can get away with working around it, where Hunter needs to get it in the window a little more than Jet in those scenarios. It has been really interesting to watch them, again, chase feeling, because I remember hearing, I think it was last year, they've gone up, they had done some new update components showing they were kind of trying to find a feeling that they'd had in some prior stuff. Since then, we've seen last year during Outdoors, by example, they went back to production linkage. They went to a 16 millimeter shock shaft, like a production shock shaft literally in the bike. Changed a few things. We come into Supercross this year. We still have a production linkage on the bike. We have the work shock body with the big CA. Had to go to an 18 mil shaft because you have to for Supercross. But a lot of the work show stuff is now 20, so they're still downsized. The fork, they went back to a production cartridge around round 3 or 4. This weekend, though, they showed up with a full production shock body on the bike, basically a Works Edition 450 shock, Works Edition fork, stock lugs, which we've seen those guys do before. And also, as you probably know, I'm still really curious what is going on in a sense of, how do I word it, the resources right now, because I know the team is super involved, but we know that the Lawrences have their group, like Dazzy and some of the guys they have in their corner are really resourceful. And I thought it was really interesting they showed up this week. And, Triple Crown, we have 2 bikes. So let me use the term A bike, B bike. One of the bikes had the stuff on it from the week before. The other bike this week had the much more production stuff on it. And Hunter rode them back to back on press day. Still kept the one with his last week's stuff as his backup bike. But again, testing quite a bit of new parts this week. And yeah, I also asked Lars post-race, and he just kept giving credit to like himself, the team, Lawrence's, just how much work they'll put in, what they'll dig through and try to figure out when necessary.
Sounded really bad that you started that with. He kept giving credit to himself.
Sorry, not Lars himself. I meant, sorry, giving credit to the team, not himself. My bad. I didn't mean that.
I was thinking aggressive.
No, Lars takes all the credit. No, he doesn't.
But to your point about like Hunter or Dazzy saying that Hunter maybe needs to be a little more in the window than Jet, Hunter kind of said the same thing on press day, which means, do we need to be having a conversation about how good Hunter can be? And we've not really scratched the surface. And I think Hunter would say yes, because again, his comments on press day were kind of in that manner. I did my little mid-season trend of asking the riders to grade themselves. And he said B plus A minus, and kind of was like wallowing a little bit of like, no, I know how good I can be, and I know what we're fighting at the moment. Like, this isn't it. And I was like, wow, that's quite a comment from a first-time 450 championship leader.
Well, one thing, this kind of goes back to a conversation I had with Hunter last year, one of the outdoor races on press day. We talked about on this pod was, at the time I was like, it's got to be tough to be coming to these races. Everybody wants to talk about your brother. You ride with him all week. You know what the differences are between you two, et cetera, and then you show up on the weekend and he does what he does. So I asked him during the week, I said, is there that much of a difference? Do you see what he brings to race day on the weekends? And he kind of laughed off and he was like, yes and no. He was basically saying during the week they are much more toe-to-toe, and he kind of joked that maybe his brother sandbags and he just doesn't know it. But now seeing even more of this, I can get where Hunter, I mean, it's kind of obvious to say he knows what Jet has done at the races. He knows, he has seen all the results his brother has done, and he's with him all the time during the week, and he goes toe-to-toe with him. So he knows what he can do on a race weekend. And I think, some of us just have chalked that up to Oh, Jet's Jet. But like I said, some of those little differences, like, hey, maybe when everything's dialed during the week, yeah, Hunter knows he can be there. He is that good. And then, like I said, Jet can kind of just work around stuff every once in a while on the weekend. Hunter is just really taking charge at the moment to be like, no, I can do this. Let's make it happen. Like, I know I can be there. I see it all the time. And again, it's a lot of, whether it's Lars, anybody on the team always says that Hunter has so much self-belief in himself. And it's one of the biggest things I credit him for is that he never can be like knocked down off that. He doesn't waver from that.
Sorry. And yeah, congrats to our partners at Yoshimura for yet another 450 SX win. Of course, exhaust suppliers to the Honda HRC Progressive team and Honda HRC Petronas in MXGP as well. So a win across the pond this weekend too. It was a very Yoshimura weekend as far as winning goes. So congrats to them. Of course, they are no stranger to the top of the podium. Another man who's no stranger to the top of the podium, Eli Tomac. Yes, he said he was happy to get out in one piece, and I do believe that. It could have gone sideways with the Vince incident, but we won't go back there. Main headline with him for his weekend was his start seemed to be much improved. And Ian said it wasn't a clutch thing, it was power delivery. Now, I didn't get to the bottom of whether that means mapping or engine or what they did, but I said, did you go back more so to where you were at the start of the season? Because let's not forget, rounds 1 and 2 specifically, Eli's starts were money, and he was raving about the power delivery of the bike. So somehow they managed to go away from that, which I'd be curious to dig into more, but that seems to be back, and that could be critical to his title run here. 4 points down, so he lost a tiny bit of ground, but 4 points with 8 rounds remaining, that may as well be 0.
One thing where you're talking about power delivery, I found really interesting from one of your conversations with Eli. I think it had to be your press day interview with him. Asked about the scoop. I think a lot of us have been waiting for him because he preseason, even when I talked to him at A1, he said he knew certain rounds that he wanted to use it. And other than Daytona, he hasn't really. Like a lot of guys, he tried it. Was it Seattle? He tried it in first session, went away from it. Jorge actually stuck with it longer. And Eli admitted to you that the scoop has been. He finally said that the bike's current iteration or it has so much traction.
Yeah, too much traction.
Too much traction. So going to the scoop is too much in a lot of these situations. Like he was literally, and this is so funny to hear from me, like he was talking about this weekend considering the 110. So it is interesting how the setup and just him adapting to the KTM where, yeah, I think in the past, like Yamaha, he got really in love with the scoop, loved the traction off it, probably got into this mode of like, if I could ever, again, figure this out, this will be amazing. Now he's on the KTM. He's like, well, it's actually too much now.
Sidebar, if you ever want to know that things can change, hard work pays off. I was once known for terrible Eli interviews, and now I'm suddenly known for quote unquote the best Eli interviews, which I don't really agree with, but I don't really know how we've turned this around so much. But the press day conversation was really good. That scoop discussion was quite interesting. Most interesting to me, because Eli doesn't reveal this stuff, is he did have a conversation with KTM about going there instead of Star when he left Cowie, which I feel like the narrative with KTM and Eli since this move is like, we've never come close to working together. We never thought this would happen. But there was at least a conversation there once upon a time. So the more you know. I don't know. I thought that was quite curious. Do you want to do championship percentages? Do you have a favourite? Honestly, I don't know if I have a favourite because Hunter and Eli are basically the same guy.
Yes, like kind of even what I said last day, I think I went 44. I think more of the conversation is, it hasn't been that long and it's how quickly this stuff moves. But I mean, it feels just like 3 or 4 rounds ago we were hyping up how it's, we still had 3 or 4 guys in this and we haven't lost Webb or Roxon in this situation in terms of to injury, which typically would happen by this point. Like when we narrow down to a 2-horse race, it's not always because the two elevate themselves over the other couple that were in the conversation. It's because the ones that were in the conversation get hurt typically. So to see them slowly chip away from those two, my question on the percentages is, do you have any percentage left for Webb or Roxon at this point?
You've got to give you've got to give Webb. You've got to give Webb something because, I mean, I mean, I don't even know if this factors in, but yes, injuries can happen even. So
Yeah.
that has to weigh into Webb more so than Roxon. And of course, Webb is closer now than Roxon. So I think that looms larger. Tomac, of course, using DecalWorks graphics, decalmx.com if you want to get your own customizable graphics. Thank you to them for their support. On to Coop. I don't know. Indy is very much his home. It's where he's good. Triple Crowns, he's good at Triple Crowns. Soft tracks where you can kind of do whatever you want in the turns, carve the track up, get creative. He's good at that. And it just wasn't there. And I don't know why. It especially stands out in contrast to his press day comments where he said he's better than ever, faster than ever, without doubt. So I don't really know what to make of it. And to add it all, to make the picture even more confusing, he said on press day that he's back to his A2 Houston base setting and alluded to the fact that the team took him away from it because they believed he could be better in whoops. But now, post-Indy, he's saying that he will be focusing on whoops in this break and I guess working with Justin Brayton, he said on TV. So I don't really know where we're at because Saturday and Friday stand in complete stark contrast to each other. So I'm kind of confused about the positioning of Webb's mindset, talent, priorities, and whatnot as he enters the second half.
This is kind of a mixed, I feel like a mixed bag because I know what you're talking about. Like we've heard him say, hey, I'm going back to the setup, which I think rings true to his narrative in general since A1 of I've been these guys before. I know how to do it. I can get it done on this setup. And I think there's a part of him that, 100% believes that and rightfully so. I think if you're in his corner, there's definitely a part to, hey, if this works, you've won against most of this group of guys doing this. So I also get the point of, no, let's just go back to what works. Let's focus on what works and let's get it done that way. But then there's the part where I think he really is putting in the pressure and maybe unlike Coop we've seen before, maybe spinning himself a little bit. Like even, okay, the first main comes out, immediately makes moves, gets in the lead, and for a couple laps, I'm like, here it is. We are executing tonight. Webb is executing. This is going to be his weekend to really put himself back into this thing. And then he just went backwards and he said post-race it was straight up arm pump. And when questioned about it, he kind of in and out of, sometimes that versus, kind of admitted the arm pump is probably the pressure he's putting on himself. He knows he needs to execute. So then you get those situations where he is putting a lot of pressure on himself. He saw himself, get blown by a few times in the whoops that night and go, okay, never mind. I have to go back because that's still my weak point. I need to be able to blitz. And I feel like he's in a tough spot because I always have a hard time with these riders year after year saying this is the best version of me, blah, blah, blah. But then a couple years later, they'll be like, yeah, I was struggling at this time. This is the best version of me. Yeah, Eli is absolutely amazing right now. Hunter is absolutely amazing right now. So if you're Webb, it's like, hey, I usually have won by this program doing this, and it is not getting the job done. So I have to be better somewhere to get the job done. So I could see him constantly kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the trajectory on what the game plan is.
I believe his comment that he said he was better than ever because him saying, for whatever reason, it's not quite clicking. The off-seat, that was almost a cover for him. For him to say, I'm better than ever, almost exposed his title, put him out there to questioning and doubt almost. So that's why I genuinely believe him, because I asked that question almost expecting him to take the get out of jail free card and go, yeah, you know what? It's just not quite there this year. I don't know why. And then we all go, well, if it was there, he'd be winning. We all know that. But I will say, it's not been bad. And I think part of the reason it looks so bad at the moment is because now we're seeing the effect of the points lost in the first couple of rounds. Because realistically, if those weren't so bad, he's 11 down. And at that point, I think we're having a very different conversation about Cooper Webb. So I do think those are looming larger than we perhaps expected. Because, ultimately, since Houston, his scorecard has been remarkably similar to last year, just a couple of third and fourths rather than first and seconds. But that's because the field is deeper. And you almost wonder, I was thinking this at the weekend, so Coop was amazing last year, and we celebrated Coop's tactics, if you want to call that, a lot. But it was because Chase making mistakes played into Webb's strengths and magnified them to everyone. So when Hunter and Eli aren't making chase mistakes, Webb's playbook doesn't work as well, and therefore we don't see it, and therefore we're not as high on Webb. Does that make sense? Like, making chase mistakes works into Webb's favor, and he almost needs the Hunter and the Eli to be doing that for his skill set to shine. I don't know.
Ooh, that's tough because I understand what you're saying. That's one of those ones you gotta be careful because that borderlines into the territory where people want to discredit Coop, of course, than the titles and be like, oh, he only wins because his competition makes mistakes. But I know what you mean in the sense that one of the best things we've said about Coop is that he executes on the nights when it needs to happen. Sometimes that is him being able to come out of his shell and show the absolute best raw speed. Sometimes that is maybe when he's not having a great night, when the guys have issues, he rises above and executes. So I get a little bit what you're saying. I think it was Entic said this in the post race, and at the time he said it, I was kind of scratching my head, but there was a part of me that was like, I kind of get what he means. Okay, take like what happened last year. It was Coop and Chase, mono and mono. He can really, narrow in on one person and chop down that points gap and take the nights where it's there and make the best out of each situation. And Ab kind of proposed it to him. Hey, is it harder for you when it's a moving target of multiple people? And Coop kind of like him and hawed around it, but he didn't exactly say no. And, I'm trying to think back, like, what a year, of course, where it was Coop, Eli, and Chase down towards the wire. So we've seen him go toe-to-toe with more than one person. That ultimately wasn't a year he won. When you think back to some of his best performances, some of his best how runs, it does feel like sometimes maybe he is better in a situation where he can narrow down on one guy and work on that rider's weaknesses and strengths and fight against that, where it is a little tougher. Like you said, right now, if you looked at Webb in his position down, if it was up against one guy, there's definitely a stronger feeling of, hey, he can get under this guy's skin. He can figure this guy out and work his way in. But when you have both Hunter and Eli on it, it's really hard to look at this and go, how does Webb claw his way into this conversation?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the comment you said about the year Chase won and it was Chase, Coop, and Eli, there are some similarities there because I just looked. Coop only won 2 races that season. He only did 14 rounds, so it's not an exact metric. But he was so crafty, so positioned well because Eli had much more highs and lows that season. He would win and then he would be 5th and then he would win. And then on the nights that Eli wasn't winning, Chase would win, but then he would be 5th. And that made Coop's playbook of seconds, thirds just shine brilliantly. And ultimately, to circle back, Eli and Hunter just aren't giving him that breathing room. So almost the only way for Coop to grab this thing by the balls is to go out there and just win week after week, which isn't his typical method or not typically what we see of him.
And it comes back to where you were talking about, you can see whether you want to call frustration or confusion or anything. He's saying right now, this is the best I've ridden. So there's probably a part of him, like what he tried to execute at the beginning of Indy. He's not stupid. He knows these guys aren't going to leave the door open. He's got to kick it open in a sense. And he's trying. He's not trying. He's trying to adjust the playbook. And it's just not working for him at the moment. So again, I can see why he's being this open. It's like I said, I now to your point, talking about this more, I agree with you that I believe him, that he is riding the best. And I think that can be part of the, I'm doing everything. And it kind of goes back to the beginning of the season where he even admitted, I think, why he got frustrated during the opening rounds. Like he won the title the year before coming with a thumb injury. Like he's done these things where he's really had to fight back, where I think this season's a lot of, I've worked my butt off. I tried to make the smart decisions by going back to the old bike, knowing what works. I've done this. And I can't remember what round it was. He said he feels like he's checking all the boxes and he's more prepared than ever, and it's just not working out for him. And it is interesting. It comes back to it. If he can get this thing done, if he claws his way back into it, even if he claws his way into it and goes to a wire with these guys, it is an absolutely impressive season for Coop because it's different than how he's had to do this before, maybe.
I mean, typically he is good down the stretch. Like if you look at Coop and Eli's career heat maps, if you want to call it that, Eli's really good from round 7 to round 12. That's typically where he does his most damage, and we're in that right now. Coop is more round 11 to round 16. So maybe that plays out. Maybe that means that we're talking too soon and it's all to come for Coop. And that is the thing with Coop. You can never count him out for all of the reasons that we just mentioned. From one Coop to another, J Coop, I feel bad for him. Because he got a main event win, but he didn't get a main event win, but it was a main event win, and it was the most legit main event win you could ever have, because Justin Cooper tracked down Eli and made a really cool, aggressive pass on him and sprinted away and was amazing, but ultimately it will get lost in history, and technically in the record books he is yet to win a main event. So I don't, first of all, really know how to approach Justin Cooper, and second of all, I don't really know how to approach Justin Cooper on the whole still from his entire career, because ultimately he's without a trophy in Indianapolis, which is cruel, first of all.
Well, two things. First off, my opinion was, damn, he must have listened to last week when we said that Joey Savacci is potentially the best of the non-top 4 now, because he responded quite well this weekend. Number two, to your point, when he made, like, I'm watching him make that move on Eli and watching him sprint away, and it's like, I'm hearkening back to what me and you have talked about on this pod for 2 or 3 years. We've put a lot of stock in him and put a lot of weight into these results. I'm going to go because you see that. You're like, yes, he is that good. You see the number 1 time qualifying performance of time. You hear stuff from Webb. You hear how he's in the week. It's like, this guy really can be this. But as it was happening, I was also, I hate to say this, immediately one of my thoughts was, great, it's going to be a Triple Crown main win. It's not going to be an overall win. It still isn't going to, like, it changes things, but it doesn't change anything at all.
I think if he'd got a podium, then it's more in your mind. But the fact that he wasn't on the podium means that ultimately you will forget about Justin Cooper and Indy.
Well, the crappy part with the podium thing is he tied Webb on the overall score. So it was so close.
And yeah, there were some comments after the race that he was too nice with Coop. Like, he should have forced the issue more because he was that good. And you know what? He had a whole shot too. So on the whole, 2 thumbs up for Justin Cooper. That was definitely a success. And we're putting Indy in the pro Justin Cooper column alongside the Daytona heat race. So he's actually on a fine run of form here. Roxon did it all for Fox Racing in Indy. He put them on top in winning fashion in main event 1. That's exactly what Fox Racing do. But then when he hit the dirt hard via a backflip of sorts, Fox Racing was there for him, kept him safe. He bounced up and finished for motos. So if you want both ends of the spectrum, which ultimately as riders, no matter how good you are, well, I guess if you're bad, I guess you won't be winning. But let's just say in your personal successes and failures, Fox Racing will be there for you no matter what. And you can check out foxracing.com for more on what their offering is. I don't really have much to say, to be honest, about Kenny's night. You?
No, the simple one is, glad he's not hurt. That was so scary, the incident between him and Aaron. Second one, similar to Coop. Based on the first race, based on how he was all day and night, it's like, Kenny knows he's, like he talked about last week, he, on one hand, the armchair quarterback side of us, the keyboard warriors are watching going, man, he's slipping out of this title. He doesn't want to believe that. He felt like he came into Indy as an airline, but really tried to execute and get himself to claw a little bit back into this thing, and it just did not go his way, which is a bummer, because when these things happen, you're like, man, he's not that much farther out the Webb, but it's also like, how's he going to get back into this conversation?
Ultimately, people are going to look at this season and go, yep, just another classic Kenny season. He was in it, and then he gradually wasn't. But I'm here to say that as of now, round 9, this is not a typical Kenny season, and it's kind of just bad luck that he's so far out, because the Hunter thing wasn't his fault. Okay, I guess, I don't know, I would put AP and Kenny down as a racing incident, but I guess some people are going to want to blame Kenny. I don't really know what you do with that, but I'm going to say racing incident and therefore bad luck. So yeah, just Arlington sick. I would say that's bad luck. I don't think this is a typical Kenny season that people like to bash him with. My headline with Kenny is after the race, he said to me, yeah, our Suzuki test rider's here from Japan. And I was like, we've got a Suzuki test rider in Japan? Never have I been so excited by something. Like, what's he testing? Does he just ride the same bike for 10 years ago? Yeah, still good. Like, if we've got a Suzuki test rider in Japan and he's at the American race, things are happening. I'm sorry, but there's no way things are happening. Things are happening.
He comes. I see him every year at a race,
No,
Lewis.
no, well, Suzuki don't need a test rider in Japan. No. Okay, so now I need to justify myself. You listen to Kenny's interview. He is borderline giddy when talking about the Japanese being at the races. Like, he is borderline. There's a lot of moving, like, as he's talking, a lot of him going, we're saying the right things. I'm excited by what they're saying. They're telling me what I want to hear, and it's good. Like, there's a lot there. So
I did ask them why they were there, and they did say it was for, particularly, Lewis said, to come evaluate races and test with Kenny. So to evaluate stuff with Kenny.
I don't know, because this is the ultimate issue that we have. I've now got opposing information. Originally, I was told Suzuki's coming back, MXGP first, because prototype bike, you can get in there quicker, start there, then America. Now at the weekend, from an unnamed source, no one from Japan, I was told they've promised America comes before MXGP, we're first. So I don't know. But what I am getting consistently, Suzuki's coming back in some form. Whether that's just showing interest, I don't know. But they are definitely rearing their head to a degree. That yellow light is about to go to green, which should be the headline of their PR when they do come back, if they ever do. Who else? Oh, Prado. Honestly, this podcast is never going to end. So Prado now. J. Coop, to circle back, went out of his way in my interview to just bash Prado. And annoyingly, I interviewed Prado pre-J. Coop, so I couldn't, get opposing sides. And then Hunter in the press briefing, aggressively. Rip. Now, I never saw that, and I don't even really know what race it was in, but Hunter claims that Jorge let Eli by and then made his life difficult.
First or third main. I played it back really quick before getting on the pod, and I kind of get what Hunter was saying. He did let Eli through, and then he kind of did a little bit of the cross jump and tried to shut Hunter down. So Hunter just drilled him before the finish line.
It's tough. I mean, I will say, I feel like I saw that was just how Jorge ran every race. Like, oh, you passed me. Now I'm fighting really hard. Oh, you passed me, but I'm still fighting really hard. It's not like I don't think he's a guy where, like, one guy passed me, now the wheels are coming off and everyone's going past me, Like, I don't know. I also asked Ian because I interviewed him after Jacob. I did ask him, like, hey, other team managers talking to you about this Jorge thing? And Ian said, which I think is a fair point. I like this to a degree. Don't come at me now. He said, I'm not making excuses for Jorge, but this is his 12th Supercross. And look at some of the other guys and what they're doing out there. And they're in, like, their 100th. And it is, like, I don't know. Do we have to cut him some slack? Because, like, he's still learning the parameters of Supercross and how much room there is. I don't know.
I think the tough one, though, is we both know that Jorge has a little bit of a reputation for how he races people, and I just don't think, it's one thing in motocross, but I just think, whether we're talking about Hunter or any of these guys, I think all of them, why Vince is getting destroyed, just there's so much on the line for Supercross that I don't think any of his competitors, whether he's raced 5 races or 25, have any level of patience for somebody to cross jump or put them in a dangerous situation is how they feel. And I watched Jorge when he basically, where did he do it to J. Coop before the whoops? They do the on off and he just kept moving over and pinched him on the triple to the point J. Coop's in the air like this because he was almost going to land on Jorge's back tire. Because Jorge just moves a little bit too much in a rhythm lane. You can tell it's strategic. He's trying to shut guys down. It's just not the Supercross way, quote unquote.
What's incredible is he never looks behind. And somehow he just, he has eyes in the back of his head because he never looks behind and yet he knows exactly where the guys are. It's almost freaky to see. And, he did go 666 on the night. So all sorts of conspiracies there, I guess, between what's going on. But I did just recall something else, and this podcast is never going to end. Ian all but confirmed, hinted, confirmed, I don't know. He said, we've got a new bike in 27. I think you got heat last week. Well, I guess we both did, but some of your heat was asking Eli about 27. I would think a lot of that's going to come down to the new KTM. Like, I think if Eli can stay on the same bike that he clearly loves, I think it's almost an automatic decision. I would imagine there would be some reluctance on his behalf just because it's like, well, what are we getting into here? Like, if I'm going to be not as happy, wishing I had the old bike, developing, and maybe I'm not into this as much. I would imagine that is going to be the factor that looms the largest.
Well, typical with I dare say yes, because they do. You've already seen the Spy Proto new plastic version. I mean, it's in California being tested 250, 350, 450, all of them. GP's Adamo, a couple guys are on the new chassis, I believe, in GP's right now. I know at least Adamo's is, correct?
I don't know.
Yeah, Adamo's is the new frame, I think it was. Per typical of KTM, one thing that wouldn't worry me that with them is the fact that it seems like every year the way they design their bikes, you can also retrofit the plastics back and forth. There's always a way to get around it because they end up protoing the bike under old bodywork. You can usually do under new. To your point, that's always been a sticking point with Eli with contractual cycles is I want to try the bike before I say yes. A, they'll definitely be able to put together a sample for him to do. But number two is I also don't think we've seen they're the brand that also would not be afraid to be like, well, if you're going to do one more with us, we'll just keep you on the old chassis under the new bodywork if we have to.
It's a fair point. It is a fair point. Jumping through 450s here, Savachi. I don't know what the status is him or of. I don't know what the status of him is yet. But I was interviewing Christian after the race as Joey got driven back on the medic mule on crutches with his pants ripped off. So none of those things give me confidence. Like
Yeah, it looked like he was holding his knee. I
yeah,
think.
nothing of the post race, which what would have been 20 minutes after the main event. No part of what I saw made me go, he's good, so, which sucks. But, you know, we haven't heard yet, so maybe it's not too bad. Maybe it could work itself out, but certainly doesn't seem good. And I still don't know what happened to him. Like,
I was hoping you knew because all of a sudden I look up, I rewatched the broadcast really quickly before we did this, and maybe I missed a replay in it. He's just laying in the mechanics area. The man's bike's on the wall, and he's over the berm, and he's holding his knee, and I'm just like, that's what I saw on the floor when I was shooting photos. I walked over, I'm like, I don't know how he got here.
maybe, if I had to guess, his foot maybe came off in the whoops and he dabbed it and that was that. And then he kind of rolled through the end of the whoops and fell down. Or in the corner before the mechanics area, there isn't really a verge to do this against, but someone kind of like squeezed him and he got pinched and his leg got caught somewhere and that was that. I don't know. Honestly, I'm just guessing. So welcome to the Guess podcast. Guess who? But we hope Joey's okay because he is having one heck of a season. And on a similar note, AP is going to be okay. Really torn up ribs, shoulder, that sort of area. I don't think it looks pretty, but it seems like he's escaped serious injury or significant injury, and he's in for Alabama. So
Yeah,
that is a minor miracle.
Yeah, he was in the airport 5 a.m. General clothes bullshit with Jordan, everybody. So, I mean, enough to fly home, not like in a sling or anything like that. He was just standing around BSing, but definitely a bit beat up.
Equally a miracle that Kenny was okay as well. So we actually got quite lucky that both of those riders escaped that unscathed. 2 more points on 450s to close. One, Ivan Tedesco all but confirmed on Friday that Faulkner is returning in 450SX but dropping back to 250MX. It's a bold move, Cotton. I don't know. Like he said, because we've got 2 450s, so then we'll have 2 250s, which makes sense. But I still don't quite get it, so I don't know. Weird. It's weird for Faulkner because he's in a bit of a crossroads with his career, and I feel like some stability in at least what class you're racing would help that. And I feel like this just adds more question marks about like what's he doing, what does he want to do, where's he best suited. So yeah, but it seems like he'll be dropping back to a 250 come the summer.
The only positive I guess I can take away from it is just relationship with the team, doing what they think is best or helps best. You know, if you're potentially hoping to stay, his contract is up, he would have to renegotiate. But in terms of a man, if he has to look elsewhere, it definitely puts a lot of confusion. A lot of people weigh up if you are somebody else that's interested in Austin of, okay, what does he want to do? What's his direction? Is he a 250 guy, a 450 guy? Where should we put him? Is he lost now? Like, yeah, it's it puts him in a unique scenario. Speaking of Triumph, at least Jordan had an improved weekend after 2 first rounds on the 450, though, that were a little too similar at the back of the pack.
Yeah, and another, like, don't believe what you read or whatever. In the Daytona press release for Triumph, Jeremy Coker said, Jordan's finally found a good setting with a bike, and now this week he's going to focus on technique and something else to do with himself, style or speed, whatever else. So I said to Jordan, how did that go? And I had the longest test day of my career on Tuesday. So I guess he didn't find a base setup.
Yeah.
And then the most hilarious thing is he said to me on Friday, I can't ride ruts. I'm really struggling in ruts as we sit there facing the Indy Supercross. So I guess with that information, an 8th in the final main event is a massive step forward. So I guess that's good. I think it is good.
They definitely changed the balance bike. He went back to air forks, which he ran most of last year. They went back to spring and beginning year, and I feel like they got the balance of the bike. He was a little bit nose heavy over the first 2 rounds he did on the bike.
And in the opposite, AP went from air to spring. So, look at that. Everyone's trading places.
Well, Aaron's is weird, too, because he's ran air and outdoors for 3 or 4 years, and the only other time, he's always ran spring and Supercross, and he ran air this year in Supercross and has talked about struggling to turn it, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'm just not a chopper guy. Yeah, he hasn't. They've ran the air 3 years, if not more, in outdoors. But Supercross, he's traditionally been a spring fork guy at KTM. This was their first big year trying to run air all the way around, and didn't work.
And finally, Malcolm was telling me about his save in the whoops. I don't know if this was on TV, but he said his hand was off for half of the whoops and he stayed upright. And it was the save of the year without doubt. And then he said, you always call me out for my starts. They were good tonight. And were they that good? I mean, I don't know. It was kind of a bold claim. I was like, I don't know if I saw you in the top 4. I don't know. I guess that's a step forward. I was a bit like, yeah, good man. I don't know if they were that good. But anyway, I think Malcolm's actually got a video of his save that he's posting on Instagram. And the other thing, this podcast is never going to end. So, Steve Mathis of Pulp MX Racer X broke this news. Justin Bogle, filling in for Jason Anderson from Birmingham. Never would have guessed. If you had given me maybe on the 87th guess, I would have arrived at Bogle. It would have been far down my list. Reaction, thoughts?
I agree with you. If I would have never guessed it, but the moment he said it, I kind of was like, that makes sense. I know Bogle's been riding Supercross, has kind of made a comment to 1 or 2 people I've heard about wanting to give it another go. The whole Oklahoma connection, Colt's buddy, has history with the team. Sure. On one hand, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. I never would have guessed it, though, but it makes sense.
It will be a cool story because people care about Bogle. He's a name, people will be going out of their way to see how Bogle's doing.
Yeah.
So it works from that point of view. I just don't know how it's going to go because it has been a while. I did stop him after the race and say, this thing isn't electric, right? Because obviously a lot of his time over the last couple of years has been on a Stark. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's been longer than most would realise. It's one of those things where you're like, he was racing AMA
what was it?
2 years ago.
3? Yeah, it's been 3 now? It's been a little while.
I would say closer to 4, I would be leaning. But it has been what would he have been on HEP the last time?
Yeah. His last would have been HEP. It was 2022, and then he tried to do WSX that winter on MDK on a 250.
So 4 years.
And then the Stark thing was kind of always a mess, and then he's been on a KTM 450 since. But yes, Suzuki 450 in 22, which would have been HEP.
4 years. Time comes at you quickly. And moving on to 250s, finally, at long last. Cole Davies delivered at long last, sticking with that theme, 1-1-1. And actually, we had a big weekend for Oceania fans with an Australian and a New Zealander on top. And I'm thinking if I look into this, 07 JS7 dominated, but Chad did win 1 or 2 races, and maybe that coincided with one of Ben Townley's 250 East wins. So maybe this has happened before for Oceania. But maybe it's the first time. Maybe it's the second time. It certainly hasn't happened much. So congrats to the Southern Hemisphere from all of us at Vital MX. You're really producing talent. Davies has wanted this, so he spoke about how frustrated he's been. I don't know if you'd call it overconfidence or what, but he definitely believes he's a man in this class, and I think he believes he can't be touched. And after Indy, I don't know if you can argue that.
I agree in that sense. I mean, he did exactly what he says he expects of himself. I think, I don't know if I would say exactly, I guess, we kind of danced on, there was a lot of Cole Davies hype coming into the season, but we were also weighing it up against, he was competitive with Hayden last year, but Hayden wasn't the Supercross racer he should have been. He is this year. So trying to weigh that up. On one hand, yeah, if he continues to ride like how he did last night, yeah, nobody else should touch him. However, it also took him 3 races to get here, and this is the wonderful 250 regional Supercross that just never seems to stay consistent. So at least, yes, I would say he's backed up what most people have said about him being a title favorite. He was good across pretty much everything all day. Similar to a conversation, kind of like the Hayden Levi conversation. Do you look at Cole as the 100% outright fastest guy in the field, or do you give Seth a bit of a nod in terms of pure speed right now when it comes down to qualifying performances and what you've seen? Or are you 100% in on Davies checks every single box?
Well, everyone would say Davies, but how much of that is the whoops being like smoke and mirrors a little bit? Because you say speed, you immediately think of Cole Davies in the whoops and you go, he's the fastest. But yeah, if you eliminate the whoops, and of course they're part of Supercross, so you can't really do that. But I don't know. I feel like Seth is really good right now. I really do. Not as good as Davies in the whoops. So I think you've got to give a nod to Davies just because of the whoops. But yeah, without the whoops, I don't know. I'll tell you what though, the Davies win really sets up the first East-West showdown, which is coming up after the break. Because Davies now has momentum, the monkey off his back for sense of relief. And Hayden's Hayden. So yeah, it's and it's going to be hard pack, which is good, I think, because whoops are going to come into play. There'll be skimmers for sure. I think that's going to make that really, really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. And congrats, of course, to Yamaha Motor USA, who lost the 250 main in Daytona and said, nah. Got right back on the horse with another rider. Of course, they have won all but one 250 main event with Max Anstey, Hayden Deegan, Pierce Brown, and now Cole Davies. And will there be another guy? You know what? Good question. Will there be another guy? Moserman? Probably needs some help. Nate is in no man's land. Maybe there won't be another guy. What would you say?
Yeah, Mosey with some help. That's it. The others will continue to dominate.
Poor Nate. Poor Nate. But congrats to Yamaha Motor USA for being on top once again. And although we're sponsored by Yamaha Motor USA, of course you can get Yamaha machines no matter where you are in the world. Like if you're on the Southern Hemisphere and you're celebrating a weekend of success, go get a Yamaha. Why not? Thank you to those guys, of course. Joe, so this is Joe. Incredibly, he had all that time off in the winter, and he didn't lose any speed, and didn't lose any fitness. However, what he has lost is his racecraft. Because in line with Arlington, we are making some bizarre attempts at the most bizarre times to make passes. And I don't really know what it is, and I'm trying to recall if Joe kind of has a tendency for this, but I don't remember any instances in the past, so I don't know.
I remember one from Supercross last year where tried to make a dive bomb from a beyond unfeasible position. So there's this part of me that harkens back to this is not completely foreign, but yeah, it's that does seem to be the one thing missing right now. It's just pure racecraft and racing decisions where you're like, that was not a good idea. That's not a good time to do that.
Yeah, it's a little bit bizarre. There were a couple, I think, from memory. And Seth, as we discussed, very fast, third on the podium. That's a win because it seemed as though everything was going wrong. Nothing was going right. Those things kind of go together. And at the sight of his second career win, comeback win, 1 year ago. But although it was a messy night, I definitely haven't lacked confidence in his ability, his consistency even, and his position as a title favourite. Speaking of title favourites, tough night for Pierce Brown. I think we're in a position where it's either going to be Cole, Seth, Joe, or Pierce, and they're all separated by 2 points. So it's very exciting. However, if I'm being honest, I kind of lean towards Cole and Seth at this early stage, and Joe would maybe be my 1C, which means Pierce would be 1D, which may be recency bias. I don't know.
I get that. Two things. I mean, across the board, the performance, yes, is not the best from Pierce. I will say, compared to qualifying, how the heat started, it still was a decent salvage based on just seeing him in practice or in time qualifying a few times. I thought, man, this Pierce is just not clicking tonight. This is not good. So we still salvaged it in a sense. But yes, I did leave that night, and this Daytona was decent. Nothing was as good as the opener. The opener had some circumstances where definitely I walk away. Like you said, your Seth and Cole conversation is a 1A versus 1A or 1A versus 1B. They're right there with each other. Joe is just a tick off that. Like you said, I think a bit of that is racecraft and just wondering how he can make decisions against these guys. I have a little bit of a harsher opinion to where they said 1A, 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 1B. Joe's a 1C. At Pierce, maybe again recency bias, but just I'm leaning a little more towards it's straight up 2. I guess you would say, like, as you know what I mean. Like you have those 2 of them; they're absolutely in it. Joe that is right there, and Pierce feels like he's a little on the outside looking in. Where, I mean, we'll see if he turns it around in terms of raw pace, but there's a part of me that feels like he needs a little bit of the typical craziness that comes with a 250 regional coast for if we're talking about the long run of full on leaving with the number 1 plate, which we're coming up on our first East-West shootout of the year. I'm saying it also doesn't shock me if he comes out and has a great performance there against his competition, because anything can happen. But I am having even though he was our season opener winner at our season opener, I'm having a very hard time picturing him coming out and just straight up winning these races going forward. I could see him, of course, whole shotting and taking it, but seeing him do something like Cole does or Seth, where one of them can start 10th and get to 2nd. It doesn't feel like Pierce is quite there right now.
Well, one thing you can be sure of is the top 4 are separated by 2 points now, but leaving Birmingham and the East-West showdown, the points are going to be all over the show, and it certainly won't be as close as it is now. I would bet that 1, if not 2 guys put themselves in a massive hole just off the back of much deeper competition. And actually, update on that, Max Anstey, of course, lost his appendix. He is going to be back for Birmingham. He starts riding tomorrow, which is Monday, as we record this. So Birmingham is not in doubt for him, if anyone was wondering, which maybe no one was. But useless information is kind of my jam. Devin Simonson, almost a podium. He was halfway through the final main event. He was 3rd overall, which would have been up there with one of the more surprising podiums in the last 2 decades. Of course, it didn't pan out, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't acknowledge just how well he rode. And even going back to last year and the 2 races he did with Club after injury, since he's been on that bike, he's proven that he has something, which, maybe you can say similar school of thought to Hunter Yoda. These guys can step up and they can really do some damage if they get the right shot.
Yeah, it's tough because I see a lot of guys like Devin in the past has not been, like I say, he showed a little bit in the 2 he did last year, but before that, I think a lot of people would have just looked at his results and been like, no, it's not there for this guy. And usually, you see these riders say, oh, if I had better equipment, if I had better bikes, I'd be a top 10, top 5 guy. Going back to the last time he raced 250s in 2022 and 23, we're talking about a guy who went 21st, 20th, and 16th. That is not the kind of person you usually go, yeah, if he's on better equipment, he's going to run inside podium in top 5 positions and finish just outside of that. If you told me you gave a 20th place guy better equipment, I'd be like, okay, 15th, 14th. So for all the guys on the outside looking in, if you ever do get an opportunity, I know everybody complains about luck. This is the old saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And clearly, Devin Simonson was prepared when opportunity arose. So hats off to him.
I do want to circle back quickly. Daxton Bennick was 4th. Very good. Again, similar to Devin, on the cusp of the podium in that mix. I don't think anyone thinks of Daxton Bennick as a great interview, but he said some really interesting stuff about the differences from Star to Husky and whatnot after the race, so I encourage you to give a Daxton Bennick interview a try. I perhaps wouldn't have, but it's actually surprisingly good. And he did have a clutch issue in the final main event, so that wrecked his very consistent night, because he, of course, went 4-4 in the first two races and then 7th in the last one. What else do we have from 250s? Jalik Swoll led 8 laps on the night. That's a massive step forward from where he was. And alongside Jordan's 8th in the final main event, finally Triumph have something to celebrate, because it has been dark times over there. Anything else stand out to you from 250s?
The only one is two riders who, based on the beginning of the season start, I really, again, there's still so much more racing to go, but two people that have fallen into no man's land, and I wouldn't have predicted this, is Dudney and Clout. I'm really curious. The East-West shootout, based on their current form, could be tough nights for either of them. I wouldn't be shocked just based on how rough it's gone for them a little bit if one or both of them do miss it. I'm curious to see once we get back to normal racing if, again, Dudney can shine like he was at the opening round. And yeah, Cloud is just, for somebody that's as experienced as him in Supercross, I really thought something better would have happened for him by now. It's, again, if you give me Clout and Simonson preseason going into 250 East, Simonson is where I thought Clout would be. And Clout is where I would have thought Simonson would be.
Yes, I think I agree. Yes, I think I agree. Although maybe I would say that Simonson would be closer to Clout, but Clout would be ahead. I did just remember the biggest story from 250s in another chapter of This Podcast Will Never End. I don't know how much you would have seen of this, but a Gavin Towers red cross flag, lack of red flag, marshal activity was an absolute shit show.
Yeah.
It should have been a red flag. It should have been a red cross flag. The marshal who was in the rhythm section had a red cross in his hand, but it was wrapped up around the pole, and he was just using it to point the riders to the inside. But on the first lap around, at least, no one took note of that. And when Gavin was in the berm, and essentially 75% of the riders used the rut at the very top of the berm and scathed Gavin and the medics by the slimmest of margins. It probably should have been a red flag, in all honesty. I mean, he was in a neck brace, so clearly that's semi-serious.
Laying there for laps. At one point, I saw one of the medics, I felt like was frustrated. He was holding up the neck brace above his head, shaking. I thought he was trying to signal to somebody, this is what we're putting him in. We need some space here.
Yeah, it should have been a red flag, but we didn't even get a red cross, which, again, the guy had a red cross in his hand. It was very clear. It just wasn't out. And the guy was wearing an AMA shirt, so he wasn't, like one of the normal flaggers. He's clearly a guy who's relatively in tune with what's going on. So I don't know. That was bizarre. Again, I said it off the top, but Arlington got a lot of heat, controversy, discussion. I would argue that Gavin Towers situation was far more egregious than anything that happened in Arlington. So I don't know what comes of that, or if anything even does. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't really shown on TV and you people don't really know what we're talking about. But trust me, it was dangerous and incorrect, I guess. Do you know how Gavin is?
He left under his own power. He was at Medic Rig until well after the second, or after the third main. He was in Medic Rig for a while, getting checked out for neck, getting x-rays, checking out his head and stuff. I gotta look. I have an update somewhere on him. I haven't gone through yet, but he did leave under his own power night, but he was under evaluation for at least another hour. Like I said, I just felt bad because of clearly the situation wasn't great, and I just kept waiting. I'm like, are we going to, same to you, just watching everybody jump that section. I was just like, this is not good.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Hunter Cole Thompson scenario in that section. If we had something similar play out in the 250 main event, Gavin and the medics are getting smoked, and in a racing, those racing incidents can happen at a moment's notice, which is why the flaggers and the flags and the lights and all of that are so important. Yeah. And they were susceptible to that sort of catastrophic occurrence as a result.
The last thing I'll say on it, and I not flack, but I think there's been question marks maybe the last couple of years at how easily the AMA is throwing the red flag, but I do think that that's fair if they think a rider's in a bad situation. We've gone from never seeing restarts for years to the last 5 years, them becoming extremely common. That was kind of back to what I felt like the sport was 7, 8, 9 years ago. Yep, we got a guy here who's potentially got some major injuries, and everybody's just riding around him for laps on end. It harkened back to an older time of Supercross. I say old. I know I'm not talking that far back, because I feel like we really have made progress in that area where they don't question a rider's situation or safety. If they're in a bad situation, we red flag it, we reset, we give those guys the space and the time they need.
Let's end this podcast with a throwback. I haven't talked about Motorex yet. And Motorex bring you for Tom Vial. What was it?
Apology corner.
Was it sympathy? Apology?
Sympathy and apology. We had two different ones at one point.
Motorex once again, despite him using Patronus now, Motorex once again bring you the Tom Vial Apology Corner. It's a good 450 rider. Good 450 rider. And
it's a good rider.
I don't know. This was a debate in the press box, so let's end on this, and maybe the YouTube commenters want to get involved. Right now, is Vial better than Prado, the same as Prado, or worse than Prado? 450 Supercross, of course.
I want to say around. I will say the one thing, and I didn't bring it up earlier, and we've already talked about, I am still mind blown at how good Prado is in the whoops. Like, if you have him and Tom right now, I would say Prado is 99% chance he is a better guy in the whoops on a 450 in Supercross than Tom would be, which baffles me.
Of course. I mean, Jorge Prado somehow is a better guy in the whoops than 99% of the other riders, so that's where we're at. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you once again to all of our partners on this Vital MX post-race show. No Vital MX post-race show next week. It's a weekend off in Monster Energy AMA Supercross, but there will be an MXGP podcast show on Tuesday this week, wrapping up the Grand Prix of Argentina. Potentially a couple more of those podcasts with some special guests and whatnot. So plenty going on to keep you busy across the off weekend. Thank you for listening and for your continued support. And we will see you all next week. Oh, no, you want to keep going?
I had one more. You gave Steve his props for breaking sun. I also had a fill-in one for you.
Well, maybe people have tuned out by now, but off you go.
Probably. When we come back from the break, Nick Romano will be filling in for Drew Adams at Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki.
Which is bizarre because I guess Drew isn't going to be out for that long.
No, it might be. I was told it potentially could only be that race. At max, it might be 3. Drew, best case scenario, I was told was 3 weeks off. Worst case scenario, maybe 5 weeks. And that's from surgery date this week. So that counts the break week as well into that scenario.
One race shot and it's a showdown. Odds are stacked
Thrown
against
to the wolves. And on Drew's bike. No test, just ride Drew's bike.
Well, if he pulls it off, it'll be one of the better stories of 2026. And the Vital MX post-race show will cover it in 2 weeks' time. Once again, thanks for listening, and we will see you real soon.